This episode of The History Guy is brought to you by MOVA Globes. Sit back, watch them spin, and be amazed. In an era where virtually every discussion seems to turn into an argument, the exploration of space has been relatively free of public rancor, even though, of course, it's always a matter of discussion for scientists. But if you want to raise the public's ire regarding space exploration, perhaps the best question to ask is Pluto a planet? Many of us grew up in an era where we were taught a 9-planet version of the solar system, and despite a decision in 2006 by the International Astronomical Union to demote Pluto to dwarf planet status, we have been doggedly unwilling to give up our faith in the farthest planet from the sun that was presumably named after a cartoon dog. But regardless of its classification, Pluto still exists, and even as the IAU was demoting Pluto, NASA was launching the first probe that was designed to study it. The history of our surprisingly fond relationship with the planet that was originally called Planet X deserves to be remembered. In 1781, British astronomer William Herschel discovered the planet Uranus, a discovery that is the subject of another episode of The History Guy. That discovery was the first new planet to be discovered since antiquity, representing a new era in planetary observation. And that resulted in the discovery of new planets. After Herschel's discovery, astronomers tracked Uranus's orbit, which takes slightly more than 84 Earth years. By the mid-1840s, it was clear that something was amiss. Neptune is an ice giant, often described as Uranus's near twin. While there had been apparently observations of Neptune going nearly as far back as the invention of the telescope, it is so far and its light so dim that even Galileo did not recognize it as a planet. Rather, Neptune was found because of Uranus. In simple terms, Uranus's orbit was observed to deviate from where it should have been, based on predictions derived from Newton's laws of motion and gravitation. This led astronomers to speculate Uranus' orbit was being perturbed by another planet. Astronomers Urbain Le Verrier and John Crouch Adams independently calculated the location of this new planet, which then allowed astronomers to identify the 8th planet of our solar system. That discovery is the subject of another episode of The History Guy. This discovery represented a unique first, as the planet was found mathematically before it could be confirmed through observation. It was, in the words of French astronomer François Arago, discovered with the point of a pen. But that pen had more to write. Percival Lowell was born in 1855, coincidentally on March 13th, exactly 74 years to the day after Herschel had discovered Uranus, to a wealthy and distinguished Bostonian family. He graduated from Harvard in 1876 with distinction in mathematics. He worked in business, running a cotton mill and making other investments, amassing a considerable personal fortune. He spent much time traveling and served as part of a U.S. diplomatic mission to Korea and became a successful author. Award-winning science writer Alan Boyd wrote in his 2010 book, The Case for Pluto, How a Little Planet Made a Big Difference, that Lowell possessed a rare combination of conventional connections and unconventional aspirations. Returning to the United States in 1893, he decided to make a career of astronomy. Boyd notes, he took much of the fortune he amassed during his early business dealings and spent it on the astronomical venture that consumed his attention in later life, the Lowell Observatory, which was founded in 1894 and is still thriving today. His observatory was built in Flagstaff, in what was still then Arizona Territory, where the high altitude, regularly clear skies, and absence of light pollution provided better opportunities for viewing. That was a novel idea. Previously, observatories tended to be built near cities for convenience, and the Lowell Observatory was unique as the first to be built deliberately in a remote location to improve the quality of the viewing. The idea has now become a basic principle regarding the construction of new observatories. Lowell's contributions to astronomy are, however, complex. For example, he spent a great deal of time mapping what he perceived to be canals on Mars. Boyd writes that the canals were an artifact of limited telescope technology and the almost unlimited ability to make patterns out of fuzzy phenomena. The existence of the features has since been disproven, but Lowell's theories that they represented a previous civilization had a large impact on the public mind in works of science fiction. and he subscribed to a curious theory about a Planet X. Lowell became convinced that there was yet another unknown planet that was causing disturbances in the orbits of both Neptune and Uranus. Starting in 1905, he set out to find this hidden Planet X, a quest that occupied his time until his death in 1916. Utilizing a group of human computers, talented mathematicians including Elizabeth Langdon Williams, Lowell and fellow astronomer William Pickering calculated possible locations for Planet X. In 1929, the Lowell Observatory again began searching for Planet X, with the project being assigned to astronomer Clyde Tombaugh, using a special 13-inch telescope called an astrograph, or astrographic camera. The telescope exposed light onto photographic plates, which then could be looked at in a device called a blink comparator, a sort of microscope that allows a viewer to look at two plates in close order, thus allowing the viewer to detect motion of an astronomical object. Poring over these images, Tombaugh was able to detect and confirm the existence of a planet that was beyond the orbit of Neptune. The discovery was confirmed on the 18th of February, 1930, but the observatory did not announce the discovery until March 13th. The discovery of the first new planet since 1846 was an international sensation. The attention reflected not just the significance of the discovery, but of the times. Boyd writes, "The times were tailor-made for a fascination with Planet X. The Great Depression was just taking hold after the stock market crash the previous October, and far-out flights of fancy provided a welcome diversion from the gloom." The name of the new planet was a matter of public concern. Hundreds of suggestions poured in. The first to arrive came via letter from an 11-year-old English schoolgirl named Venetia Burney. Interested in classical mythology, she suggested the name Pluto. It was a perfect fit in many ways. A child of Saturn, Pluto was the god of the underworld, particularly fitting for a planet where the surface temperature can be as low as minus 400 degrees Fahrenheit or minus 240 degrees Celsius. Moreover, the mythological Pluto had the ability to make himself invisible, a fitting trait for a planet that had managed to stay hidden for so many years. What's more, the name Pluto and planetary symbol PL played homage to Percival Lowell, who had played such a role in making its discovery possible. And the new planet affected public perception in other ways as well. In September of 1930, a new cartoon from the Disney Company was released called The Picnic that introduced a new character, Minnie the Mouse's dog, Rover. But by May of 1931, when another cartoon, The Moose Hunt, was released, the character of Rover had been changed. Now it was Mickey Mouse's dog, and its name was Pluto the Pup. Walt Disney never confirmed that the name was derived from the new planet, but the timing has even Disney historians suspecting there must have been a connection. But if the name of Mickey Mouse's dog is not definitively known to have come from the planet, another was. In 1940, scientists at the University of California at Berkeley, led by physicist Glenn D. Seaborg, bombarded uranium with deuterons, creating a new element, element 94. Seaborg decided to name the new element after the most recently newly discovered planet, calling it plutonium. But for its outsized effect on public perception, no one could yet figure out exactly how big this new planet was. It was simply too far away for telescopes to effectively perceive its size. The breakthrough came in 1978, when astronomer James Christie of the United States Naval Observatory divined from images that Pluto had a moon. He named the new satellite of Pluto Charon, Charon, the name of the mythological ferryman who carried souls to Pluto's realm. Having two data points finally allowed astronomers to calculate Pluto's size, and it was disappointing. Pluto, it seems, was only approximately 1/6 the size of Earth's moon. Among other things, this implied a surprise. Pluto was far too small to affect the orbits of Neptune and Uranus. In fact, data from NASA's Voyager 2 probe eventually determined the abnormalities that had convinced Percival Lowell that there was a Planet X were the result of a miscalculation of the mass of Neptune. While the search for Planet X had resulted in finding Pluto, it turns out that was merely a matter of luck. And the small size led to a difficult question. Was Pluto really a planet? The first challenge came from British astronomer Brian Marsden in 1980. Speaking ironically at a celebration of the 50th anniversary of the first time that Claude Tombaugh first viewed Pluto on February 18th, Marsden shocked the crowd by suggesting that Pluto should be reclassified as a minor planet, more an asteroid than a planet. The suggestion was partially driven by his suspicion that there were many such celestial objects in the space beyond Neptune. By the 1990s, other objects in the so-called Kuiper belt were being discovered, and it appeared that Pluto was not alone. In fact, some speculated that there might have been thousands of objects, roughly the size of Pluto. Marsden's suggestion in 1980 was rejected, but in 1998 he again suggested reclassifying Pluto. And while the scientific community was split, the public was outraged. So much so that the International Astronomical Union had to issue a statement denying any effort to redesignate Pluto. Pluto files, Boyd notes, rejoiced at the news, but the reprieve would only be temporary. The writing on the wall came, well, literally. In February of 2000, the American Museum of Natural History in New York opened the Rose Center for Earth and Space. In their model of the solar system that was part of the renovated Hayden Planetarium, Pluto was notably missing. When a public outcry ensued, the center added a small plaque on the wall, explaining that Pluto was omitted because the display was meant to highlight the solar system's bigger classes of planets. In February 2001, in response to the public outrage, much of it derived from a front-page story in the New York Times published in January, Museum Director Neil deGrasse Tyson defended the choice. Rather than use the word planet as a classifier, we essentially abandoned the ill-defined concept and simply grouped together families of like objects. In other words, instead of counting planets or declaring what is a planet and what is not, we organized the objects of the solar system into 5 broad families: the terrestrial planets, the asteroid belt, the Jovian planets, the Kuiper belt, and the Oort cloud. While the museum added the aforementioned plaque, the message was increasingly clear. Pluto's family was not among the planets. That decision was officially made in August 2006, when the International Astronomical Union voted to redefine the word planet and to demote Pluto to the new category, dwarf planet. Space.com notes that the decision was billed as a victory of scientific reasoning over historic and cultural influences. In response to the decision, the American Dialectic Association voted the word Plutoed, meaning to demote or devalue someone or something, as the 2006 Word of the Year. The decision was, in large part, motivated by the discovery of another object. Forbes magazine explained last year. What few people remember is why the definition of a planet had to be revised in 2006. The real reason was a recently discovered object called 2003 UB313, at first nicknamed Xena, but then later renamed as Eris. Although it is usually 3 times farther out on an eccentric orbit of the Sun, Eris is only very slightly smaller than Pluto. And back in 2006, it was actually thought to be larger than Pluto, and it had been thought that Eris could officially get planet status at the IAU meeting. But, the magazine continues, with several other candidate objects found in the early 21st century that were thought to be about the same size as Pluto, the IAU thought there was a problem. If Pluto was a planet, then so was Eris, and all these other objects. Can we have 10 or 15 planets? With ever-advancing technology and new telescopes, how about 50 or 100 planets? The decision to downgrade Pluto was far from universal. The vote occurred on the last day of the meeting of the IAU in Prague, when just 424 astronomers remained. NASA planetary scientist Alan Stern complained to Space.com, "I'm embarrassed for astronomy. Less than 5% of the world's astronomers voted." Stern had reason to complain. He was the principal investigator on a NASA program called New Horizons that had just launched the previous January. Its primary mission: to send a probe to perform a flyby study of the Pluto system. Boyd suggests that at least some claim that the New Horizons mission was the result of a set of postage stamps released by the post office in 1991. Each stamp highlighted a planet, and 8 also included NASA probes that had explored them. But the Pluto stamp read merely, "Not yet explored." The story goes that scientists at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory saw the stamp as a challenge. However, he argues that the true antecedent went back to 1977, when NASA made the decision to send Voyager 1 past Saturn and its moon Titan, rather than to faraway Pluto. In any case, around 1989, a group of scientists, including Stern, determined to press NASA for a mission, calling themselves the Pluto Underground. For their part, NASA writes, "A close-up look at these worlds from a spacecraft promised to tell an incredible story about the origins and outskirts of our solar system. New Horizons is exploring, for the first time, how ice-dwarf planets like Pluto and Kuiper Belt bodies have evolved over time, and adds, "The United States has been the first nation to reach every planet from Mercury to Neptune with a space probe. New Horizons is allowing the U.S. to complete the initial reconnaissance of the solar system." While the plans went through several iterations, the final plan, New Horizons, is what NASA describes as a piano-sized probe. Among its instruments is a powerful telescope called the Long Range Reconnaissance Imager, or LORI. Fittingly, the approximately 1,000-pound spacecraft is powered by a radioisotope thermographic generator, or RTG, which is powered by plutonium-238. Launched aboard an Atlas V rocket, New Horizons first passed by Jupiter the following September, where its instruments probed the atmosphere and studied the gas giant's Jovian moons, while getting a gravity assist on its trip to the rim of the solar system. The probe made its closest approach to Pluto in July of 2015, although scientific study of Pluto and Charon began 5 months before the closest approach and continued at least a month after. Among the many discoveries was that there is likely a vast liquid water ocean beneath Pluto's surface, and that nitrogen ices on Pluto go through a cycle every day, subliming from ice to vapor in the daytime sunlight and condensing back on the surface during the frigid night, creating a sort of heartbeat that controls Pluto's atmosphere and climate. Hal Weaver, a New Horizons project scientist at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory in Laurel, Maryland, said of the research, "In the flyby, New Horizons transformed Pluto from a fuzzy telescopic dot into a living world with stunning diversity and surprising complexity. We were all astounded by the range of phenomena in the entire Pluto system, from Charon's polar coloring and giant chasm to the ice ball makeup of the 4 smaller satellites that offered valuable clues to the system's origins. The Pluto encounter was exploration at its finest, a real tribute to the vision and persistence of the NASA New Horizons team." Despite some hope from Pluto files, the IAU has never changed its initial determination. Today we are officially an 8-planet solar system. It is an irony that when New Horizons launched in January of 2006, it was going to explore a planet that by the time it arrived had been, well, Plutoed. It wasn't the only thing that had changed. When New Horizons launched, Pluto was known to have 3 satellites. There was Charon, but there was also Nix and Hydra, 2 moons that had been discovered by the Hubble Space Telescope in 2005. But by the time New Horizons arrived at Pluto, 2 new moons had also been discovered, Styx and Kerberos. Its primary mission over, NASA received funding to continue New Horizons' mission to explore additional Kuiper Belt objects, including the Trans-Neptunian Object 486958, Arrokoth, the farthest and most primitive object in the solar system to have been visited by a spacecraft. NASA estimates that New Horizons instruments have enough power to operate well into the 2030s, and New Horizons might go to investigate other Kuiper Belt objects. As to the mission itself, Forbes magazine argued that when New Horizons flew by Pluto on July 14, 2015, it revealed a world that was as intriguing as anything else in the solar system. And with that, another irony. Such were the riches discovered on Pluto, Forbes argues, that had we known about them at the time, it is unlikely that the IAU would have been able to remove its planetary status. The surface of Pluto is an icy terrain of frozen nitrogen, and if you're a fan of the accomplishments of the New Horizons probe, then you'll be happy to know that this globe of Pluto uses images from NASA's New Horizons program to give you a first-hand look at the deep craters and brown colors of the dwarf planet. NASA tells us that if you were standing on Pluto at noon, that the sun would be about 1/900th as bright as it is here on Earth at noon, but still 300 times brighter than a full moon, which means that if Pluto were a globe like this one, that might just be enough light to make it spin. If you're a fan of the History Guy, you've seen my collection of these globes grow. These are called MOVA globes, and their first-of-its-kind technology allows them to spin. No wires, no batteries, just by the power of ambient light and the Earth's own magnetic field. And they come in more than 40 designs. I'm a big fan of these things. I guarantee you that if you put one of these on a desk or on a shelf, that they will be a subject of conversation. They make great gifts. If you want to purchase one, go ahead and use the link in the description and the code The History Guy to get a discount on 6-inch and 8.5-inch globes. I hope you enjoyed this episode of The History Guy. Check out our community on thehistoryguyguild.locals.com, our webpage at thehistoryguy.com, and our merchandise at teespring.com, or book a special message from The History Guy on Cameo. And if you'd like more episodes on forgotten history, all you have to do is subscribe.